and you'll be asked for your consent to record. Before we get started, we want to make sure that we share this out with a number of people. Just so that our participants and moderators are aware, we have about 40 participants in this meeting so far. So as many of you know, my name is Jeremy Coates. I'm with the Institute of International Education, IIE. I'm based in our Washington, D.C. office. I've been leading the GDFP from the IIE side since its inception. But I'll be speaking a little bit more later about some developments with the program. But I would like to turn it over to our colleague, Eleni Agoridi, from the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, who without their funding and support of the GDFP and the HDAA, we would not all be here today. So Eleni, would you like to deliver a few remarks?
Yes, thank you, Jeremy. Good morning and good afternoon to all. Happy New Year to everyone. At SNF, we have always strongly believed in the important work done by the Institute of International Education. And IIE has been one of the foundation's closest and longest term partners. We feel privileged to support the Greek Diaspora Fellowship Program, a program that strengthens connections among Greek academics working in any discipline at institutions around the world. SNF's support for the GDFP is part of the Foundation's broader effort to further collaborative and mutually productive international exchange of knowledge and experience. For anyone joining today's event who is not familiar with the program's mission, I will briefly mention that it seeks to advance and internationalize the excellent work already being conducted at Greek institutions of higher education by individuals and groups of academics. The program provides a framework for accomplished members of the Greek academic diaspora who want to contribute to research and higher education in their country of origin to do so. SNF supported the launch of the program in 2016 and has continued its support through a subsequent grant. Through the program's 4 cycles, a total of 123 Greek diaspora scholars across a broad range of disciplines have taken part. As the program has grown and evolved to ensure that the ties formed through the program prove durable, a critical component moving forward will be the formalization of the long-term partnerships between academic institutions the GDFP helps initiate. This aim, we believe, will be best achieved through the launch of the Hellenic Diaspora Academic Association. Back in November 2019, following the start of the second phase of the Greek Diaspora Fellowship Program, IIE established the Hellenic Diaspora Academic Association, incorporating input from hosts and fellows, as well as from other academic associations, including the Modern Greek Studies Association and Fulbright Alumni Association of Greek Scholars. Since the establishment of the association, IIE has convened a steering committee comprised of host and alumni fellows, which is responsible for its strategic planning, platform development, and activities. In 2022, the steering committee will call for members to join the association and announce a web-based platform for collaboration. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of all my colleagues at SNF to thank each and every one of you who has worked to ensure the success of this initiative. From Jeremy Coates and Mary Karam McKee of the IIE to Artemis Zenetou, Executive Director of Fulbright Foundation in Greece, whose contribution has been invaluable to realizing the program, to each member of the advisory board and the steering committee. I look forward to the launch of the inaugural lecture series and the discussion by renowned scientist, Dr. Paxinos, moderated by Dr. Touroutoglu. On behalf of all of us at the SNF, I look forward to seeing how the GDFP continues to evolve, flourish, and foster valuable connects that transcend international boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleni, and thank you for you and your colleagues' support of this program over the years. It's really has brought a lot of change from what we've seen with our evaluations to higher education institutions in Greece, and also built sustainable linkages between institutions all over the world and Greek institutions. So thank you all for that and that support. Now I want to turn it over to our colleague, Artemis Senitu, from the Executive Director at the Fulbright Foundation in Greece, who, as Eleni said, we wouldn't have been able to be such a success without her support, the colleagues in the Fulbright office, and getting the word out about this opportunity and supporting our hosts and fellows as they go through their projects. Artemis, welcome. Artemis? Oh, sorry, one moment. Sorry, we seem to have a little bit of a technical glitch here with the permissions. Give me one moment, please, to correct this. Okay, Artemis, sorry, you're now unmuted. My apologies for that.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we certainly can. Thank you, Artemis.
Wonderful. Well,
oh, we lost you. Artemis?
Yes, okay.
Okay, we can hear you now. Yep.
Well, kalimera or kalispera, depending on which side of the globe you are participating. And thank you very much, Jeremy and Eleni. This has been a truly valuable partnership. And for those that may not be that familiar with Fulbright, Fulbright has been working on international educational and cultural exchanges between Greece and the United States since 1948, so close to 75 years. So it was only natural and complementary to the Hellenic Diaspora Fellowship Program that were invited to join as partners. Initially, the collaboration was between Greece and the United States, but then the countries were extended to include a number of Greek diasporic countries. And we're very pleased actually that with today's lecture, we're reaching out to Australia with a great scholar, Dr. Paxinos, and I'm pleased to say also the Fulbright in Australia is led by someone of Greek descent. So since its inception, Fulbright Greece has conferred almost 6,000 scholarships, creating also a vibrant, dynamic, diverse, and interconnected network of alumni. Fulbright Alumni Association was also consulted at the beginning of the Hellenic Diaspora Academic Association, and we truly feel that through these alumni associations, we achieve the multiplier effect after the completion of all the grants. We look forward in collaborating and supporting in every way possible to spread the word and increase the network of the Hellenic Diaspora Academic Associations. Look forward to a very engaging lecture and the inaugural one, Kali Archi, and we'll look forward to many more interesting events. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Artemis, for those comments. And yes, from where I sit, we're definitely seeing the multiplier effects of these opportunities, and the HDAA is certainly a way for us to get that underway. I just wanted to give everyone in the call a little bit of an overview of the HDAA, just so you're a little more familiar with what we're trying to do here. I have seen someone put in the chat already that their interest in contributing to the HDAA, so we will be in touch with you if you're interested in joining us. But, you know, we assembled after that meeting Eleni mentioned in Athens a few years ago. We took volunteers for this steering committee, and they've been, you know, strategizing and meeting monthly since then, pretty much every month since then, to, you know, define what the activities of the program are going to be. And they came up with the following mission statement, which I would like to read just because I think it's very well crafted, first of all, but also it really drives at, you know, what Artemis just mentioned with the multiplier effect of the GDFP fellowships that have translated into HDAA engagement. So the Hellenic Diaspora Academic Association is a global organization connecting scholars in Greece with members of the Greek and Cypriot academic diaspora. Its mission is to provide pathways to scholarly excellence through collaboration for knowledge creation and dissemination, research, education, and mentorship. Just so you know, the HDAA is open to anyone from the Hellenic academic diaspora. It's not just limited to those who have received Greek Diaspora Fellowship Program grants. So this is one thing. We want to make this association as broad and open as possible. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge our steering committee members. As you can see them all listed here below. We wouldn't be where we are today with this program, with the HDA, without them, and thank them for their constant communication and contributions to the discussions about this opportunity of developing an academic association. So thank you all for your work here. I wanted to also kind of give you an idea of what the activities of the academic association are going to be. At this point, it's really twofold. The first purpose is to hold these distinguished lecture series. We plan to do them every other month. At the end of the call, we will announce our next speaker, who will be doing this on March 15th, doing another distinguished lecture on March 15th. And we'll have more directly into discussion or with those. But since this is our inaugural meeting of the HDAA, we wanted to be sure and give everyone an overview of what we're doing here. So beyond the Distinguished Lecturer Series, we also are working to develop a WordPress site that can be a social networking opportunity for members of the Hellenic diaspora, as well as for individuals residing in Greece and working in higher education. So we hope to have that out in the next few months to hopefully by April at the latest. It's taken us a little longer to develop, and as you know, COVID delays has delayed a lot of activities over the past few years. So we will have a WordPress site where you all can engage with one another. We hope to incorporate different kind of widgets in this system to where you all can engage with one another. You can identify possible academic collaborations and also possibly identify opportunities to mentorship between the diaspora and individuals residing and working in higher education institutions in Greece. So I wanted to give you that brief overview of this program. Before we launch into the main reason why we're all here today, which is the distinguished lecturer, Dr. George Paxinos. And so I will turn it over now to one of our HDAA members, Professor Alexandra Torotoglu, who is at the Harvard Medical School and who will be the moderator of today's discussion. Professor Torotoglu, can you are you here?
Yes, thank you,
Great.
Jeremy.
Thank you.
Can we start the video as well?
Please do. Yes, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Jeremy, very much for the kind introduction. And thank you to all participants who are here today. I'm very excited about our HDAA inaugural event. After all this planning and work, to see this program coming to life with such a distinguished speaker is very gratifying. Jeremy, could you please allow me to have my video on?
Oh. Yes, I just made you a co-host, Alex. Sorry about that, and I'll do the same for Professor Paxinos.
Okay, great, thank you. It's really a pleasure and an honor to introduce you all to Dr. Paxinos. I met Dr. Paxinos through his book when I came to Harvard to do brain imaging. On my first day at work, my Harvard professors handed me a book, The Atlas of the Human Brain, and said, "This is the most essential guide to those who are interested in working with brain imaging." I was pleasantly surprised to see a Greek name as an author, and I felt this was a very welcoming thing they could do to introduce me to the field. It's I wanted to share some of my readings about his life and about my experience about his career. So let me start by saying that Dr. Paxinos was born in Ithaca, Greece, and he finished his high school there. He then moved on to the US, and he received his bachelor from the University of California at Berkeley, followed by his PhD at the University of McGill in Canada, and then his postdoctoral fellowship from Yale University. He was a visiting scientist at Cambridge, Oxford, Stanford, and UCLA. And he's currently the Scientia Professor of Medical Sciences at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. Dr. Paxinos, if you look at his scientific career, you will realize that he really paved the way for future neuroscience research by being the first who developed a three-dimensional framework, stereotaxic framework, to place electrodes and injections in the brain of experimental animals, which is now an international standard. And so this speaks to the fact that Dr. Paxinos has been the scientist who has identified more regions than anyone else in history, 94 nuclei, and he has published 58 books. His book, The Rat Brain in Stereotaxic Coordinates, has been the most cited book in neuroscience. And for many decades, it has been the third most cited book in all science. And so his analysis and really the concepts of brain organization has been used by many scientists around the world who are interested in studying the relationships between brain and behavior, brain and symptoms in disease, including neurological diseases and psychiatric diseases. So Dr. Paxinos has been very well known for his work in neuroscience, but he's also very interested in the environment. And so very recently, he published his first novel in the environmental theme, A River Divided. The novel, we'll talk more about that at the end of the event, but just to give you an overview, it really encapsulates most of the most important questions, social and moral dilemmas of the modern era. It is really inviting for a reset of science, religion, and culture. We'll talk more about that. So it is a real an honor to meet you, Dr. Paxinos, this way, after having grown up in neuroscience and neurology with your books and atlases. So let me welcome you and give you the floor to hear about your work. Thank you.
Dr. Paxinos, you'll need to unmute yourself. Oh, you're still muted.
It is a privilege to be here. Thank you, Alexandra. And if I can share my screen here, all advanced options, share screen, there we go. And I want to share this one. And just to start with a quote from Mark Twain, it is always embarrassing when they introduce me. They never say enough. Okay, now, right. Now starting with the first slide. There we go. Okay, where are we? Where is my? Oh yeah, wait. PowerPoint. There's the PowerPoint. So this should allow me, all panelists, that's right, and therefore can dispense with that. And okay. Now that should show something. Also not yet.
Right now, we're just seeing a blue screen, Dr. Paxinos.
Yeah, all right. Let me end show. Okay. There we go. This one. Are you seeing something?
Yes, we are.
Okay, now we are at it. Okay.
There we
now, yeah. Why psychology lost its soul? And I will firstly take you through some of the journey I have had in neuroscience, and then some historical aspects, and then trying to answer this question, which is a similar question to brain and mind. Who is the puppet and who is the puppeteer? And now, why psychology lost its soul? Everything comes from the brain. That's the short answer. The brain and mind, who is the puppet and who is the puppeteer? You can see here who is. And the question is, where is the mind in this dual arrangement, and where is the brain? Now, the atlases that Alexandra mentioned, it is not always an advantage to make atlases. I did my first one 40 years ago. Recently, I met a lady at the neuroscience meeting and I introduced myself, and she said, "George Paxinos, I thought you were dead." And the claim to fame in psychology that I have is that I shook the hand that shook the hand that shook the hand of Wilhelm Wundt, the founder of psychology in Leipzig in 1879. And we started our work with the rat, as I was working then in behavior in psychology. And I was interested in the rat brain. And I thought I'd be able to construct a better atlas of the rat brain than was available at that time, and did the Stereotaxic Atlas after I came across a stain of the brain that showed the divisions as though somebody had colored them in already. And in this case, it's the monkey amygdala that you see here and the basal ganglia. And nobody can make a mistake here that this is different from that this is different from that, and that, and that. And I just stumbled across this acetylcholine stain and used it for the rat. And then, whoops, why is this falling through? Well, oh, that's all right. And someone was speaking at that time, Floyd Bloom, you know, and said the gain in the brain is mainly in the stain. And that was indeed the case at that time in the 70s. And here we go. I don't always stain the mouse brain, but when I do, I prefer acetylcholinesterase. And following the rat, I thought of trying the human brain, but prior to attempting that, I thought of trying another primate where I could get the brain at short period postmortem rather than 10 hours, which is the case for humans. And here you have a small primate, the marmoset, that you can see it's the size of a small rat, yet it has a primate brain. In fact, the areas are very, very similar. Probably nothing of the 100 or so areas of the cortex that exists in one and doesn't exist in the other, the human and the marmoset. But I really tried firstly, I wanted to try first with a chimpanzee. Now, I didn't have a chimpanzee to pose for me, and here you get an orangutan, and you can see the external similarity to us. Internally, they're also similar, very much so. I wrote to the Taronga Park Zoo for the opportunity to do a postmortem on a chimpanzee once a chimpanzee died. They responded they would be happy to oblige, but they had not had a death of a chimpanzee in the zoo for a decade. 2 months after receiving my letter, 3 chimpanzees died. Luckily, they didn't suspect me. And I studied the brain of one of them, the brain stem actually, and we found that there was no difference between the brain stem of the chimpanzee and our brain stem. And that led us to do this work that you see here, the human brain stem, cytoarchitecture, chemoarchitecture, myeloarchitecture. And you might say, of course, the brainstem is easy. What about where most people are interested in, the cortex? Indeed, for functional psychological, neuropsychological studies, anyway, the cortex is the important thing. And there is a map of the cortex, which is fantastic, by Konstantin von Economo and Koskinas. Unfortunately, it's not used, and it's the Brodmann map that is used, though it's far inferior. But we used the von Economo map in our construction of a map of the marmoset that you see here. Different colors are different areas, and indeed the areas that you might have worried that they wouldn't exist in a small monkey, well, they're there. Even, would you believe, those that in the human subserve language, such as Brodmann's area, 44A and 44B, they're there. And someone asked us, well, are you going to say that they exist in the monkey? When did you last have a conversation with the monkey? Our answer was that if these areas in the human brain exist in the right hemisphere, where language is not localized, then we have the right to find them in the monkey who doesn't speak, if cytotectonically, chemoarchitectonically, they are there. They have, there's a homology. But you might say, of course, a lot of things are done now on imaging. And indeed, we're getting into this field as well. A few years ago, we published an MRI DTI atlas of the rat brain, where you have the additional advantage of seeing connections, at least in some way. If they're going mediolaterally, anterior posteriorly, you can see which direction they go. But you you might say, of course, well, again, the human is the important one. Well, the human, we have done an atlas that Alexandra kindly mentioned. We're not happy with our results in the cortex. We tried and synthesized the work of some people, and this edition, fourth edition, is better, but still we are not happy. And there are others who are doing good work with the MRI in the cortex, in China, in the US as well. And these works this postmortem tissue that I've been involved with in the brain stem of the human, we're going to publish this work soon. And you can see the corticospinal tract in blue and the pontile decussation here in red, because it goes mediolaterally, it goes from the pons to the cerebellum. So here you can have some color coding of pathways. You do lose on resolution, of course. And I'll show you here something that we are really working now, and hopefully we will publish in 2 years' time, which is the living brain. This, in fact, is one of the 3 prospective authors of this publication. So he's a colleague, and you can see that a number of structures can be visible even in the living brain at rather good resolution. And we hope that we will be able to do an atlas. We're in fact working on this right now. So in 2 years' time, it might be out, the MRI DTI atlas of the living human brain. Now, I now took you through some of the things that I've been doing for the last little while. And the question is, of course, what does this all mean in terms of more important questions, including the environment, the survival? And I'll reflect with you on this. And brain or mind, the question has social, legal, and religious implications. If the mind controls the brain, then there is free will. And its corollaries, dignity and responsibility. You are king in your skull-sized kingdom. You are the architect of your destiny. If, on the other hand, the brain controls the mind, an incendiary conclusion follows. There can be no free will, no praise, no retributive punishment, no purgatory. Of course, that's not so bad. If there's no purgatory, that's not so bad. That's actually good. Perhaps little hope for survival. Are we just our brain? Does our mind have any agency? Now, the story of the brain goes back a long time, and there are a few people who praised it. I have some reservations about the brain, but here we start with Aesop. The fox entered the house of an actor, and rummaging through everything, she pulled a mask, a beautiful imitation of a human head. She put her paw on it and said, "What a beautiful head, yet it's without any value because it's entirely without a brain." And who would consider Woody Allen as an optimist? But even he, when he comes to the brain, he said, "The brain is my second most favorite organ." And without special examinations, of course, not possible to infer that the brain creates the mind and its anatomical seat of cognition. We consider the Egyptians. They discarded heedlessly the brain and sent millennia of pharaohs brainless to the afterlife. But it was the pre-Socratic philosophers who rejected the supernatural causes and mythical explanations of the physical world and nature of the soul, including the relation between psychological events and the body. These philosophers replaced myth with reality, banishing gods and magic. Alcmaeon of Croton is considered to be the first who established the relation between brain and psychological events. And that information from Crotone, present-day Italy, Magna Grecia of ancient times, this information passed to, seems to, Kos, where the greatest doctor of antiquity lived, and it was Hippocrates who uttered an astounding modern view of the brain. Men ought to know that from the brain and from the brain only arise our pleasures, joys, laughter, jests, as well as our sorrows, pain, griefs, and tears. Unfortunately, Aristotle, perhaps the greatest scientist of antiquity, misjudged here and thought that the brain was there to cool the blood, air conditioning. And a professor's greatness is measured by the time he manages to stymie progress in his field. And of course, that's the responsibility of the successors, and they just kept religiously believing in Aristotle. And though there was another choice, that was Galen of Pergamon, and you can see Pergamon in present-day Turkey, and he has offered the encephalocentric view, which competed with the cardiocentric view of Aristotle, battling each other out for 1,300 years until after the dawn of modern science. And in fact, you see in Shakespeare, Portia in the Merchant of Venice asks, "Tell me, where is fancy bred?" Fancy being love, or in the heart, or in the head. And on the 14th of February, if you go to pick up a Valentine's card, as I did, I was confronted with 300 cards, all of them with at least one red heart on them, none of them with the brain. And I was forced to write a letter in the newspaper. "Darling, I love you from the bottom of my brain." And a lady journalist from Melbourne called me, "Are you insisting that the heart has nothing to do with love?" I said, "If in a heart transplant I get your heart, I'm not going to fall in love with your husband." She said, "What a pity, because he's such a nice guy." Next time, ask me, and you can send something that's equally beautiful and even true. Now, after so much battle to localize the seat of the soul, psychology loses its soul in the 1930s. The mind is the integration of the activity of the brain. There's no ghost in the machine. Now, in a talk that I was going to give on the mind and the soul, I asked someone before going in there, it happened to be a student, said, "Do you have a soul?" And the answer was, "Pardon me." Eventually, she understood that the question was well formulated, just unexpected. And she said, I did until I did my PhD. Now, there is the soul is superfluous to requirements for psychology. Psychologists do not use soul, and if they did, it would be cruel, at least in some occasions. Just imagine a child with autism, they're difficult in behavior, and say your soul is to be blamed. If you say that there's a neurotransmitter in short supply that we might be able to do something, or at least you're saying it is not really your essence, your soul, that is the problem, and blame the person. Now, soul is really not required for psychology. Psychologists don't use the word. The psychoactive drugs act anywhere except the soul, maybe on the dopamine, the noradrenaline systems, anywhere, not the soul. Now, is it the case? What happens with free will? Because this is one of the things that humans are supposed to have. Well, many philosophers and neuroscientists think that behavior is the factor, is the outcome of two and only two factors over which we have no choice: the genetic endowment and the environment. We don't choose our parents, and we don't choose whether we were, our grandmother was taking drugs, or we were born in a Christian, in a Muslim society, and so on. And the brain will make a decision on the basis of past influences on it, and cannot make any different decision. There's no choice. The brain will inform the narrator, as we think that we made the choice, but the mind has no influence on the brain, according to many neuroscience. Of course, what I'm saying now is the view of the majority of neuroscience, I think, but the minority could be correct, and all this could be incorrect. But at the moment, I think a lot of things can be explained by just considering it thus. And the environment sculpts character, as this artist, Phidias, possibly sculpted Apollo from a Parian marble in the statue from the temple of Zeus in Olympia, as behavior is sculpted from the genes we are granted, as Praxiteles sculpted Hermes in this statue. Neuroscientists agree that genes confirm predilections. Many neuroscientists believe the environment is the only sculptor of behavior. If only we could abandon our undesirable desires, our depression, our obsessions, our compulsions, our unrequited love, Alzheimer's disease will pay an unwelcome visit to many of us at the end of life. It will disrupt the internal structure of our neurons, and we will be living in evidence the mind is the product of the brain. It has no influence on it. If only we are the authors of our thoughts and not the mere observers of what the brain presents us. If only the puppet could get a hold of the strings with which the brain makes it dance. If only the puppet is free inasmuch as it loves its strings, says Harris. So neuroscientists either don't believe that there's any freedom at all, no free will, or there's freedom light somewhere, a little bit, just some little bit of freedom somewhere. They admit that if you are abused in infancy as a child, you are likely to be an abuser yourself. That is, of the abusers, adult abusers, many of them have been abused themselves. So they accept that we are products of our environment, but somehow, some way, they think, some of them, that there is some free will. To me, it looks as though if you can predict behavior, then there can be no free will. And increasingly, psychologists are able to predict behavior, and we are slaves of yesterday. But there is one important thing. Today is tomorrow's yesterday. And whatever one is subjected to today will change their brain. Tomorrow, they can make a different decision under the same situations, environmental stimulus, as they would have today. And that is where psychologists have a role to assist the person to change behaviors that they consider undesirable. And in one domain of behavior, in domain of love, you can see what Carmen says, l'amour jamais, jamais connu de loi. And this you can see in Greek songs, Θεέ μου, αν θέλεις το καλό μου, βγάλ' την αυτήν από το μυαλό μου. He's invoking God to get her out of his brain. Why doesn't he do it? And you might say, well, this is just academic exercise. In real life, it makes no difference. Not quite. Of course, the legal system has to take account of this. And there can be no hate. If you can rid yourself of hate, if you understand that the person who wronged you could not do otherwise. And I remember Jesus on the cross. He said, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. If only they had been exposed to the ideas we have been exposed to, they would be like us. And in the real society, you would find that over 50% of the people who are abandoned abuse the person who abandoned them in their house, in their work, in the internet. They might hit her, they might kill her, they might commit suicide. If only they attended some neuroscience lectures, they might understand that much like they cannot jettison their love for that person, she cannot make herself love them. The brain is the puppeteer. Therefore, it's important to know if the brain has the right size. This is important. If my conclusion of studying the brain is that if the brain were smaller, less clever and capable of language than what it is, it would not have been able to produce the science and technology which today threaten existence. If the brain was larger than what it is, humans would have been able to comprehend the problem, even rectify. The brain is just not the right size. And here you go, what we should try to avoid, intelligence, make them extinct. And here is the triple delusion that we operate under, that we have free will, that we have a soul, and that we are made in the image of God. The ancients used to take dim view of people who offended them in this way. And you can see here Phaethon falling from strike by Zeus when he took control of the chariot of the sun. And this made me, I was interested in the environment since I was in the United States and Canada, like 50 years ago. And I've seen things deteriorate, and I was involved in activism in Australia, but every time I failed, and it was really out of a failure that I decided, perhaps if I wrote a novel, I would be able to take the reader with me and work upstream to behavior, that is attitude, because it's hard to stop someone from cutting a tree, but if you convince them that the tree is a good thing in advance, then he wouldn't want to cut the tree. And it's a novel in the environmental genre. Neuroscience principles are used in formation of characters such as those related to the mind, the soul, free will, and consciousness. Environmental issues are at the center of the novel, including the question of whether the brain is the right size for survival. Characters in the novel speak directly to the principles of neuroscience, for example, Professor Eastbrook does, or demonstrate these principles as in the case of, you can see the characters have no freedom whatsoever. And this is the novel, A River Divided. And it really asks the question, what if Christ were here today? What would he say about the state of the environment? What place would he take in the boards of the corporations or with the demonstrators? I failed in everything I tried. You see here the light rail attempt. some of the things I experienced myself in life, death of a close friend, and his experience with temporal lobe glioma, I incorporated the book. In fact, a lady in Greece read the book, and she thought that she recognized temporal lobe glioma in a friend of hers. So the science tried to keep correct, and the literature was problematic. I was good at writing abstracts and not at writing literature, and it took me 21 years. And here things start at Masada, that you can see here. They continue in Jerusalem, and here's the crucifix and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and some you can see the rocks at the top of Golgotha, the lit rocks, and you can see the lanterns over the representation of the anointing of Christ, and the Holy Tomb, and various places and places that the novel takes place, including Ithaca, and then in Rome, and in the Vatican. And you can see these actually on my website. I have them, and in the Amazon, which the river divided. Okay, and the identical twins produced out of this discovery that Evelyn makes in Masada, and they are separated, and they are going to meet for a moment only in the Amazon, to be lost again forever. And you can see that one river is colder than the other, darker than the other, more acidic than the other. They have different origins, but their destiny is the same. And the Amazon, in Buenos Aires, where the Cathedral of Buenos Aires, things take place there, and the medical school, where the students demand that Argentina works with other nations to produce a sustainable population through health and other means. And here we have the church where also a lot of things take place, and the University of New South Wales. And here, for myself, with Cicina Ferreira, the first girlfriend of Che Guevara, who allowed me to use our conversation in the novel that I was planning back then in the 90s. I was planning the novel. And if I may just read to you one sentence from the book, which indicates that the book involves consideration of neuroscience. The identical twins raised apart in the book are the protagonists, and they have a certain genetic inheritance which they don't know about. As different artists sculpt different statues from the same block of marble, different environments produce different characters, even in identical twins. Thank you for giving me the privilege. And I stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paxinos, for such an interesting lecture. Now, let's open this up to questions. I'd like to start with a question about the big picture. What do you think the next big discovery actually will be in our field, the neuroscience?
Yes, if I may quote firstly, someone who said it's difficult to make predictions about the future, especially about the future. So yeah, but I guess where the ship is going is more and more imaging, and they are doing a good job. Of course, imaging is often used frivolously, and I have had some writer friends now that I have some more friends, you see, and they ask me to scan their students before and after they undergo this magical training of creative writing to see changes in the brain. And I said, look, your best indicator of whether you've done well or not is to give them a chance to write the paragraph before and a paragraph after you finish your training. That is your validation. You won't get validation by checking the brain. Yeah, but I think the field is moving that way. But again, I'm not a good prophet.
Thank you. And if you were to choose just a single problem to solve or a discovery to achieve in neuroscience, what would that be?
If only I could contribute something to consciousness, because that's really the big problem, because whatever else we accept mechanically, there's something magic that occurs if you get enough neurons and enough connections that's not present in stimulus response creatures, non-consciousness. But then, as by magic, you can fall in love. And that is not the same thing as observing neuronal spikes. We know that the brain is responsible for that. We know that consciousness is withered and shrinks with Alzheimer's disease, or when we're embryos who hardly have any, and when we're falling asleep, we're losing it. But we know that some animals with smaller brains have smaller repertoire of consciousness, but that we know that all vertebrates have it, but it's still impossible to say. I mean, as complex as a computer might be, I haven't seen the most complex Macintoshes, Mac computers. I haven't seen them fall in love with an IBM computer, neither even with another Mac. I don't know what's happening. It has to be in the brain, but I don't know what's happening.
Thank you, Dr. Paxinos. I think our audience would also be very interested in hearing a little bit about your own career trajectory. Can you tell us what motivated you to get involved with neuroscience? What were the people that helped you, your mentors and their influence, any turning points in your career?
Yes. I was studying mathematics, and I was taking an elective in psychology, and I was looking forward to the elective, but not to mathematics. And I thought, why change? I had a charismatic lecturer in psychology. And the next big turn came when I went on a sabbatical at Cambridge, and I saw this stain that showed the brain as though a neuroanatomist had delineated it. And I said, I'm going to do a good job with this, not because I'm good, but because the stain is good. The good things about a career that might be worth considering is I have got the fortune of having a good collaborator. We're still collaborating 43 years later, Charles Watson. And the issue there is that if you are generous with your colleagues, you're likely to get it back in a bigger way than any gain you would have done by demanding some greater portion for yourself. So that's what I found helpful in my career. And the next transmutation happened, of course, when I wrote the novel. I haven't abandoned neuroscience. In fact, I'm in the thick of it. And this is my first and last novel because I don't have anything else to say. I've said what I want to say. I took anybody who will read it will notice neuroscience, you will notice psychology, will notice some archaeology, the genetics. They will notice things that they've been themselves exposed to actually, of course, put them in a way that is not disliked by the reader is a job, and this is what took 21 years and many classes. But the other thing is, of course, if you like what you're doing, like I liked what I was doing with the maps, and I haven't stopped because it's like solving a crossword puzzle in finding out what is in the human brain now, on the basis of the rat. And it was also, I had an easy run. Brains are the same virtually, the subcortex, spinal cord even worse, so to speak, it's the same. And so, yeah, doing a lot of books, if they are on the same topic, it's easier.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paxinos. I think we are about to wrap up, and thank you very much for the great lecture and your insights in the field. Well, if you like this lecture, we'll have more lectures to foreshadow what will come. The next distinguished lecture will be on March 15, Tuesday at 12 p.m. Our next speaker will be Professor Forecas, an academic and professor of applied mathematics and theoretical physics at the University of Cambridge in the UK. He will be talking about the grand illusion and the two big bangs of mental evolution. Moderator will be my esteemed colleague, Panagiotis Kebrekidis, a professor at the Department of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So thank you all again. And I would like to give you, Jeremy, the floor for your closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Paxinos. What an informative lecture you just gave us. I feel like I learned a lot as a non-STEM field person. So thank you for making it very relatable to all of us, the content. I want to thank, of course, Alex for her moderation today of this event and her organization beforehand to get all of these pieces put together. So thank you so much, Alex. And once again, a big thank you to the Alumni Steering Committee for all their hard work getting this together. Thanks again to the Niarchos Foundation for their support of this initiative, as well as the Fulbright Foundation. With that, we will, of course, be notifying all of you of an invitation, a flyer of our upcoming March 15th distinguished lecturer, which, as was mentioned, Dr. Fokas will be joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say. So with that, thank you all again for your time, and I hope you all enjoyed, and we look forward to hosting similar events in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank
you,
you.
Alexandra. And Fokas will tell you something different of what I told you today. I guarantee.
Good. And we'll, of course, be sharing out a link to this recording to the attendees, and also disseminating in our networks too. So we'll make sure you have a copy of that, Professor.
Have a good day.
You too. Take care.